All right, and we're live. Welcome, everybody. Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Appreciate you
Yeah,
having me on. So,
it'll
yeah,
be a
like
good
we were
time.
kind of chatting about, started coaching back in 2011 with CrossFit. I've been doing CrossFit for a little while.
Mhm.
I started out of necessity to be able to speak in front of large groups. So I was a regional property manager back in Ohio. Grew up in a small town called Salina, Ohio, and I was doing regional property management for a big firm out of Columbus. And so I had 20 property managers that I would be managing and getting up in front of and speaking with, as well as their employees. And every time I get up in front of people, I would just freak out, just freeze up. And
Mhm.
so I was doing CrossFit at the time, and the coach recommended I started coaching as an
Oh,
opportunity to speak in front of people. And I've always loved, fitness and health. And, back in the day, it was Men's Health Magazine was where I would
oh
get
yeah,
all that stuff and
yeah.
follow those.
Is that still around? Is that still a
Yeah,
publication?
I don't know, honestly. I imagine it's got to be. I don't know if they still have a paper anymore or a paper copy. Maybe it's
Oh, I
all
used to
digital now,
devour
but
those. Yeah,
oh, dude, it's the best, right? You get like the fold out and then you
yeah,
follow that. I remember that in high school. I'd had a little gym down in the basement, some old concrete weights and like the old
yeah.
school stuff, and I
Mhm.
just make it work. So, but yeah, so I was doing started coaching, and it was in exchange for a membership, and then fell in love with CrossFit. I had moved out to Colorado in 2012
Mhm.
and found a CrossFit out here I really liked. I was living up in Frisco, and that's like ski resorts and up in the mountains, elevation 9,500 feet, something like that. And so started doing CrossFit there, spoke with the owner about coaching, and
Mhm.
I was working with Vail Resorts at the time. And the more I got into it, the more I loved it, and
Mhm.
ended up doing it full time, or going full time, quit my job and taking the leap and starting to coach full time as well as help manage their affiliate.
Yeah.
The the owner of the affiliate, David Tittle, had been working on CrossFit HQ as a seminar staff and needed someone that was going to help watch after the business while he would be gone on the weekends. And so I helped with that, and yeah, from there moved down to Denver, coaching full time down here. I worked with Pat Burke at MBS CrossFit. Ended up opening up a second location for
Mhm.
MBS, and then over time bought out that location, and now we are Ralston Creek CrossFit. So we just are coming up on 10 years
Mhm.
affiliated, which is sweet. And so that's my story of how I got into affiliate ownership and the coaching and all
That's
that.
interesting.
So, yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard a coach explain their journey into it because they were trying to get better at public speaking.
Oh yeah.
That's really
Yeah. And
interesting.
there are other pieces to it. So another piece of it as well was um, I watched a documentary back in the day called Food Matters, and that I think that came out in like 2009 or something. And
Mhm.
in that they talked about the Gerson therapy, and which was, curing cancer, but in America it wasn't allowed, and so people were flying down to Tijuana to have the therapy done, and they were curing cancer, and they were talking about vitamin C supplementation, and just that was the first time that I had heard that food would cure, or food was medicine.
Mhm.
And from there, I dove into all the other conspiracy stuff, learned about
Mhm.
the, Federal Reserve and all the stuff that Mark
Oh,
England would
it's a
talk
glory
about.
time nowadays to go into this.
Oh,
Yeah.
dude, it's like just winning every week now. So, but back then people weren't, open to that kind of stuff, what I would be learning. But I did see an opportunity for how are we going to change society? How are we going to redirect it? And then seeing CrossFit as being kind of this other path that was going against the grain, right? So they started up and they're doing their own experiments, and the experiments were being done in the gym or in garages, and they're collecting data on physical fitness and through different workouts, and I that really spoke to me when I saw that and understood the philosophy behind it when I went to get my level one. It opened my eyes to, well, here's a pathway for me to help change and redirect society, which is really the ultimate goal for me,
Mhm.
was to get us on a better path. Now, it can be argued that we maybe have fallen even further off of that path, or maybe we're getting ready to go through a full awakening and go the other side, right? A lot of people are starting to see it for what it is.
Mhm.
And so that's interesting too. But that was a big piece of it for me as far as the gut telling me that I needed to change my life and go in a different direction. So
Yeah. What was it about the modality of CrossFit that spoke to you? Were you into training or fitness beforehand and then kind of went into this, or was this kind of like a new venture? What were those early days and what kind of spoke to you about more of like the functional side of training?
yeah, so like most people with reading Men's Health magazine and and doing the workouts in there, and I did triathlons. I was on my bike a lot at the time. I did a race every year that would go from Cleveland down to Cincinnati, like a road race. It was 4 stages, cool, fun stuff like that. And I thought I was really fit. And then I had a friend introduce me to CrossFit and talked me into coming in, and I thought the price point was so high for a membership. And then I got in there and I was like, oh, now I get it. And as soon as I got through that first 25-minute AMRAP of burpees and wall balls and box jumps and I had to puke, I was hooked. And I just had seen it for what it is. And I think that's a lot of people back then, the old days of CrossFit, it was a little more raw, where, we'd be bleeding and we would be pushing ourselves to the point of, they had a
Mhm.
mascot called Pukey the Clown back in the day. They've kind of let that one go. Um, but that's what it was. It was a different culture back then of like people
Mhm.
really, we were pushing ourselves, we were pushing each other. There was no complaining, your hands ripped open, you're bloody. The coach would say, okay, tape it up, let's go, keep going,
Mhm.
that kind of thing. That has changed now.
Yeah.
The culture has certainly changed with that, and we have as coaches as well. Um,
How has it changed, do you think?
well, we are definitely more accommodating when it comes to understanding that not everyone wants to be pushed
Mhm.
that far, and nor do they need to. There are certain fire breathers, and back in my mid 20s, which is when I started, that's what I was.
Mhm.
And now I'm 40, 42, going to be 42 here in a few weeks. And that's not what it is. Now, there's sometimes when I want to still push myself like that,
Sure.
but it takes me a week to recover from
I
that, right? So
totally
it's
get
not
it.
the same
Yeah.
training. Yeah. When we start to see that as coaches now, we can see it from the perspective of, the stimulus we can have a stimulus that we want the athlete to hit, and scale and modify accordingly so that they still hit that stimulus. But the important thing is that they're safe
Mhm.
and they're getting back in here the next day. Um, the consistency is way, way more important than the intensity. And even CrossFit has always said that. It's just that our culture back then was a little different, at least from where I started. But um, the the hierarchy of how we coach always starts with mechanics, and
Mhm.
then from there it's consistency with those mechanics, and then and only then do we add in intensity.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's similar. Like I came from like the hardstyle kettlebell world of like the RKC and Strong first, so kind of working with Pavel. And I remember when I first got into it about 2009, it was a much different program that you went through of what it is now. And I'm not saying it's better or worse, but it was just different. Like
Hmm.
there was almost like there's like a militaristic feel when you went into it of pushing, and you were sore by the end of that workout and or that weekend of like getting certified. But you also like there was this real badge of honor that you like earned like what you just did.
Oh
And
yeah.
now it's I mean it's changed, and I think it's a lot more, inclusive with as far as like the teaching and the instruction of it. But I also like I feel almost like an old man saying this, like the glory days of going back, but there is something to that, like pushing like past like where you are, where you're putting a little blood, sweat, and tears into it, that you realize your capability is much more than your perceived limits when you get through that. And I think the only way that you can do that often is to put yourself in a situation where you got to really, give it everything you got past your perceived limits. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that having opportunities to do that push is really important.
Mhm.
And so we have in our programming, we'll have certain days that are benchmark days, and those are the days, and we'll let our athletes know, hey, today is one of those days.
Mhm.
We're gonna push hard today. I we're going all the way through. I want to see, 9 to 10 effort, like let's go.
Mhm.
Right. And then there are other days where, hey guys, we've been, it's the end of the week, you're feeling it. Let's take it a little more easy, scale back on everything and use this as more of a, I don't want to say active recovery, but a check-in day.
Yeah.
And so those are important too. Being able to push yourself in anything that you do is super important. I think, have you heard of the Masoji? Is that the right term? Like once a year, you do
Yeah,
something that there's a
my like
50-50 chance of completing.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
like Michael Easter popularized that in the Comfort Crisis with
Yep.
that term, and my good friend Craig Marker, who was on here, we were talking about that, and
hmm
it's interesting, Jeremy, because I think there's the message of fall in love with the process, like work it consistently, and kind of it doesn't need to be high intent, like everything doesn't need to be hit work and high intensity. But I think in the midst of that message, it's also got lost where it's like, well, you still need to push hard every once in a while and test it. So I like the approach that you have of like, yeah, these are our benchmark days that we're coming in.
Yeah.
We're telling you ahead of time so you can probably mentally prepare and know
hmm
where it's at. Because it's not just one versus the other. Like everything, there's usually somewhere in the middle that you need to,
Oh,
meet, which is
absolutely.
that Goldilocks, type approach.
Yeah, and I think that, age demographic does matter, even though we don't want to necessarily, you and I want to admit it. But my training style has changed, and it's my main focus is being a good father and a good business owner and good community leader.
Yeah.
And if I'm hurt or laying dead on the floor, I'm not living up to those. And so priorities change with all of that too, which I think is just a piece of the growth. And if you think about like with CrossFit and likely with the kettlebell scene as well, when it was in its more infant stages and becoming more popularized in the US, um, it was it was just that, right? It was a teenager at the time.
Right.
So it fed off of those things. And now CrossFit has changed its tune slightly to where we still have those days, but nutrition, recovery, those things have become way more paramount in the
Mhm.
way that we coach now, which
Yeah.
is great. And that's the way it should be.
That's an interesting perspective. It's like when things start out, it's just like you're like a human child just going on. You have so much energy and you can recover
Yeah.
really quick from you can take big swings and big chances on stuff and probably recover a little bit faster, but then eventually you get a little bit more experience and a little bit more seasoned and
hmm
you start to refine the values a little bit more. I'm in a similar boat. I just turned 41 this year, and
Nice.
it's it's funny because like the movements that you can do, like and even like the intensity is still there, but the volume really needs to be dialed in a lot differently because the recovery time is different. Little swings of being off in stress or sleep, it does hit you a little bit more in where your energy is at for that time. And I used to think I knew that like when I was young as a coach because I worked with a lot of seniors or people who are more adults, I'm like, oh, I understand this perspective. But you're still an outsider looking in. Like it's like
Yeah,
once you're actually in it and you start to realize it, you do get a little bit more feel because you're living it on a day by day basis.
absolutely. It's, when before you have kids,
Mhm.
you think you understand what having kids is like. And then you have kids and you're like, oh, I didn't. Yeah, I had no clue. And here I remember coaching people that had children and doing like nutrition coaching with them.
Mhm.
And we talk about sleep and hormone regulation and all this stuff. And I'm this, 32-year-old coach with no kids or obligations outside of my coaching career. And I'm telling a mother of two kids that aren't sleeping through the night that she needs to get more sleep.
Yeah.
Right. And now I look at that and I'm like, what was I thinking? I feel terrible. Right. But at the same time, it's you don't know until you know. And
Yeah.
that's a part of the maturing process of as a coach, as a modality. CrossFit's going through it right now,
Mhm.
where you see it's they're maturing as well with their approach to fitness and looking at it on a global scale and making sure that we're getting to all the demographics that really matter. Where the CrossFit Games is slowly taking a back seat to what we are doing in the affiliates, and they're focused
Mhm.
more on what we're doing here. Whereas there was a time when the CrossFit Games was so important to CrossFit,
Sure.
seemingly, right? And the sponsorships and the athletes, and it was a big deal for the CrossFit Open. Whereas now we're more focused on the community aspects and giving back and understanding that everyone has uh, different needs, and it's important, right? To meet everyone where they're at.
Yeah,
So.
I love that. Yeah. In your early days of coaching, so you started in Ohio and then you moved out to
Mhm.
Colorado and work. What were those early days of coaching like for you? Was it something that like hit you right away, like, oh, I really love doing this, or was it a big learning curve for you of, obviously you said you
Huge.
weren't great in front of a group and speaking. How were those early days for you, kind of looking back in retrospect?
Yeah. So it starts off, I think when you first start coaching, there's this extreme fear and self-doubt and imposter syndrome happening, mixed in with this sense of like ego,
Mhm.
right? So there's many stages to that process of, doing well and then kind of being knocked down and understanding that, hey, you don't know everything and you need to take a step back and pay more attention. I had many of those throughout my coaching career. Um, Not until recently had it become where I went through the stages of, in my early days of coaching, level one, level two. I interned with CrossFit headquarters as for a seminar staff position. Learned so much during that time. I also got a big ego, not in a sense of having that in front of my athletes, but in my head thinking, well, I know what I'm doing now and
Mm.
feeling confident. Whereas now I've had, I did my level three back when they first released that. So that would have been 8, 9 years ago, something like that. And I just passed my level four, which is a in-person practical where you're coaching two classes in front of a two evaluators. And and the difference was feeling confident and then feeling comfortable. And Mark England with Unlifted talks about this switch that happens after, I'm nearing I want to say I'm nearing 20,000 hours of on the floor coaching experience. And the difference between 10,000 hours of coaching and 20,000 hours is very, very confident, able to see and correct and do everything really smooth, to feeling very comfortable, not needing to have the answer, but instead being able to hear
Mm.
each athlete for what they're really asking and then being able to adjust accordingly, as well as being okay with the feeling of it not being perfect. And so
Mm.
the confidence, I'd say that there is still a piece of doubt in that lives in there, still a piece of ego. Once we get into the comfortable, that all just starts to dissipate and disappear, and it becomes way more fun. So going into my level 4 practical, the success rate on that, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's something like 3%. And there's only, you know, a couple hundred of us in
Uh-huh.
the world. So it's a real low success rate. And going into it, of course, I'm a little bit nervous, but when I actually walked into it and started coaching, and I did it, and I decided going in, I'm just going to do it my way. I'm not going to worry too much about trying to make everything perfect. I'm
Hmm.
going to make sure that when I finish, those athletes remember me. They feel like they got something positive from me, and they walk out of here with a smile. Like that was my main thing. Um, and that worked great for me because all of a sudden it wasn't about me. It was about the athletes, and I just facilitated everything to ensure that they had great classes. And that made it really comfortable for me. I just enjoyed the entire process and then left there not too concerned at all. So it was great.
That's a really interesting juxtaposition of confident versus comfortable. I never thought of it that way. And there's so much we've heard about with the 10,000 hour rule, like Malcolm Gladwell popularized that with outliers. And it's like, oh, it takes
Hmm.
10,000 hours to be an expert. But there's not much talked about, well, what happens after that? Like there's still more time that you're in. That's 5 years. But if you're a 10, 15 year, 20-year veteran, what are you learning on those next stages afterwards? Because if you're on a mastery track, you're going to keep learning and keep
Hmm.
progressing from there. If you think of that on like an approach to coaching, like the practical way of the difference between kind of confident versus comfortable, what are the biggest changes that you think you do as far as approaching working with people from that spot when you're really confident in what you're doing to now being really comfortable? What are the big like practical applications that you think
Hmm.
are the big changes for you?
Yeah. So the I talk to my coaches quite a bit, and we're actually this week going through evaluations, and we're talking a lot about coaching the positive. And to give you an example of the other side, so when first going through and doing my internship with headquarters, it was known that we would never say it looks good. We'd always say it looks better because it can always be better. So
Mhm.
when we're correcting someone, shoulder position, deadlift, lat activation, I get them in the position I want. That's much better. Not that's good, right? And so you're always kind of
Mhm.
leaving like it's like this carrot dangling, right? That type of coaching. The difference now is we talk about I want my coaches to do a ratio of 3 to 1 on affirmations to actual corrections. So positive to negative. And I'm not saying negative as in they're doing something wrong, but I want them to start seeing and again, I keep bringing up Mark England and the Enlifted program, which I highly recommend to anyone that wants to up their
He's
game.
well known on this podcast,
Yeah,
yes.
good, good. So he talks about the reticular activation system. If we as coaches are always just looking for what needs to be fixed or what's wrong, then that's all we're ever going to see in an athlete. I am challenging my coaches now to pick 3 things that they're doing really well and voice those over the things that they're doing wrong. If there's a structural issue or something that's going to become a safety concern, then of course we're going to fix that. And we're going to make sure that we accompany that with more affirmations. CrossFit talks about this as being a compliment sandwich. And I like compliments. However, compliments can be, hey, dude, your hair looks great today.
Right.
Why don't you sit back in that squat a little bit more and push those knees out? Oh, you stood up. Nice
Yeah,
butt
they're so
squeeze.
far on the spec.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And I'm challenging my coaches to find the affirmations of what they're doing well and being able to actually pick out what they're doing well. So they're not empty compliments. Instead, they're affirmations. And what we have found is that as we're coaching in a group dynamic, if you're setting up and I'm having you up in the front rack position, Mike, nice elbows. I love how high those are. Good eyes. And I say it loud enough that I'm obviously directing it to you, but it's loud enough for everyone to hear. Guess what everyone does?
Mhm.
Everyone does this. Why? Because everyone loves to be complimented.
Yep. Me
Everyone
next.
loves
Me next.
affirmations, right?
Yeah.
They want me to notice that too, right? So all their elbows go up, all their eyes are on the horizon. They
Mhm.
start fixing things, and now my group dynamic is very positive, and so the flow of the class changes, where it's not me going around and doing, again, going back to like the more the military style, where I'm calling reps, which I'm still calling reps, but then I'm just correcting the faults. I'm now instead affirming what's being done well and then seeing the response. And if I see the response I want from the rest of the group, now I don't need to have the correction or to voice the fault for everyone. I can instead just confirm that they're doing what I want them to do. And
Mm,
so that comfort level of not needing to be right all the time or needing to be fully in control has allowed me to shift into more of the affirmations instead of negations, as Mark England would put it.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I think in a group dynamic, it's so fascinating how to get your point across. I love that for the 3-to-1. We used to say too, if you do one out loud for the group and then another one like right to the person, like in a group, and you just go over and like, hey, that looks awesome. Like
Mm-hmm.
just for them, it's like
Oh yeah.
it's like that individual like private coaching in the midst of a group dynamic. Like it feels so good. And yeah,
Yeah.
as a coach, it feels good too. That's interesting. Is there a reason why it was 3-to-1 that you decided on that? Was that a specific thing versus 2-to-1 or like 4-to-1? Was
Mm-hmm.
that like what was the meaning behind that?
So there is I can't remember the book now. My coach and I were just talking about it, but in that book, they were talking about the ratio of the the way that a negative comment will affect you and how long it will actually um, affect the way that you operate goes, it's 3-to-1. So meaning like if I give you a negative comment, you're going to hold on to that for three times as much as I giving you an affirmation.
Gotcha. Mhm.
And so just considering those things, not saying that correcting while we're coaching is in any way negative. However, there are definitely subconscious factors at play. And in a group dynamic, understanding that if I'm going around and all I'm finding are faults and I'm not giving out the affirmations on what
Mhm.
they're doing well, then I'm now creating that emotional dynamic within the class. And what happens is we'll start to see people start to get quiet. They start to hide in the back, right? They maybe something is happening outside of class and that sparks something else.
Mhm.
My wife yelled at me for not getting the dishes done, and now this coach is over here telling me I need to get my butt lower. Are you kidding me? Right? And that's going through their minds. They're not
Right.
voicing that, of
Mhm.
course, but that's what's being created.
Sure.
Whereas my wife just told me to get my dishes done, but my coach really likes how well I'm pushing out my knees. Right?
That,
Like,
yeah.
hey, this is good. Like, so the difference between
My God,
those,
we're so absurd as human beings with how our brain operates. It's
it's
crazy.
crazy. It's
Yeah.
crazy. And that happens, one-on-one coaching. I used to do one-on-one coaching quite a bit. It's kind of how you keep the boat afloat when you're just being a full-time coach. Um, and noticing the difference between that, someone that comes and pays for one-on-one coaching, they really want you to be on top of what they're doing. And you can get more technical in those environments. In the group dynamic, you should always be considering how it's making the entire group operate together.
Sure.
And so having a flow within the class and how we work that and facilitate is a huge piece. We talk all the time as coaches about they're not going to remember the one thing that you said during class about their push press, but they are going to remember how you made them feel.
Mhm.
And if they felt good about what they did when they walk out of here and that they improved, then that's a win. They are coming back and they're excited about it.
Mhm.
So understanding that is important.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we can get so hung up on the technical side of things as coaching, not realizing that our main job and people are coming to see you because they want to feel good. They want to feel powerful. I've spoken about this at nauseum on the podcast, but when Joel Cochran was on the podcast and he said, our number one job as coaches is to instill confidence in people because when people are
100%.
confident, they'll move mountains. And the way that you do that is, start with some affirmation and not just blind affirmation. As you said, nobody gives a shit if their hair looks good or not. It's like, what do they do? Especially something like the gym, where probably a lot of people, especially if they're new, are a little self-conscious. You're putting yourself out there into a vulnerable state with other people. You're like seeing the person who's been there for a year who looks awesome and their stuff. So you're already comparing, to them. So you're already probably feeling a little self-conscious. It's amazing how little encouragement that we need to just get us in a completely different zone of confidence and keep us moving forward, which I think is one of the best things that we could possibly do as coaches.
Yeah, I love that. Joel's great dude. I've done some coaching with him, like had him coaching me on mindset stuff, which really helped push me into going for the Enlifted
Mhm.
mindset certification. Um, and what happens when we go from them feeling confident to comfortable then, just like as a coach, right? So we can take that, and confidence is great. Like I want them to have that
Mhm.
confidence and take that out into the world. What changes if they go from that confident to comfortable? Can we as coaches facilitate both, where we're leading them into that comfortable with themselves place?
Mhm.
Something to think about.
That is, I'm really going to think more on this confident versus comfortable. I think that's a really interesting kind of back and forth because comfort has been given these like a bad rep of that word,
Mhm.
right? Like we're never
Mhm.
supposed to be comfortable. But in this context of it, there's a much different definition behind it. That's why words matter. The words that you use, I think, is really important. We've talked a bit about mindset, and I know the work that you've done with Mark and Enlifted. When did that start coming into your repertoire of wanting to put more of a focus on looking at the mental performance side rather than just on the physical performance side?
Yeah, I think it's always been a piece of it, that understanding that if someone is sick, then no matter what they're doing on the outside, no matter how well they're doing in their business, if they're sick, then that foundation of being able to operate well in the world and do good things for the people around them it's going to be tough for them, right? And we see that in the obesity epidemic, and don't get me started on pharmaceuticals and all the other stuff that we're going through right now. We can see that in that people just don't have the energy to help other people. And so while I took on becoming a CrossFit coach with the idea that if I make people healthier, if or help guide them to being healthier, then they're going to help the person next to them. And then that's going to radiate out like a ripple in a pond. Um, what I didn't catch at the beginning was that there's an underlayer to the body, and that's going to be the mindset.
Mhm.
And just this week, we were talking in the Enlifted group, and I had this realization of I've been so focused on our pyramid of hierarchy, and CrossFit starts with nutrition and metabolic conditioning and gymnastics, weightlifting, and sport at the very top. What's underneath nutrition? Well, that would be mindset.
Yeah.
If our mindset's not right, then no matter what we do with nutrition, right, no matter how hard we try with that, it's going to be something that we try to do,
Mhm.
not something we are, right? And that shift, when I made that realization, I had the realization maybe 6 years ago, something maybe further down the road, but I couldn't understand how to facilitate it
Mhm.
until I met Mark in the Enlifted group. and learn the practical tools and the technology that they use of being able to take a person and their stories, which is the mindset, and being able to break those up and give them some room to breathe, right?
Mhm.
Not necessarily associate themselves with those stories and be able to become the observer of the story instead of the person in the story.
Mhm.
And then from there, then once we break that up, then we can go into starting to celebrate wins.
Mhm.
And then from there, we can truly goal set. But before that, goal setting, and this is why in New Year's resolutions, we just got through them, right? Everyone just got through their
Mhm.
dry January that lasted 5 days and whatever else. And the reason is they make these goals, but the goal is not truly in line with who they think they are.
Mhm.
And until we make that shift, then that's not going to matter. And so now I see the mindset as the true foundation to what we do as coaches. And we
Right.
do we do it in a lot of different ways. Even in here, had people feeling support through the community and us coaching them and them having a healthy group dynamic
Mhm.
will help. And if they still have a story about why they're not that person,
Right.
then ultimately we're going to continue to fall into those same holes. So
Sure.
yeah, it's amazing. I can't, give them enough credit for what they've done.
It is. I think it's so important. And I think where a lot of people struggle and like the challenge of this is even like with a hierarchy, right? We think like you need to do one first. And I think a lot of people they look at that and be like, oh, well, I need to get this down first before I can do anything else that I'm going on. I need to know exactly why my goal is my goal and stuff. I have this like love-hate relationship with goal setting right now, Jeremy, because I think it's important to have a goal and know why like the goal is your goal, but at the same time I think to believe that you know exactly what your goals are at the beginning stages of starting something new, I think is a fallacy, because I was talking about this with Zach Henderson when he was on the podcast, and we talked about when people get some momentum and they're doing some good things, it starts to open up other capabilities. Because if somebody is such in a shit zone in their life and you're saying you need to know why you're going to achieve all this XYZ, well, they're in such a bad state at the moment right now. They're not thinking that anything like that is capable. And if they do, it's going to feel so overwhelming for them. But if you get them in the process of doing some things, gaining some momentum, doing a challenging thing of like getting into a workout or changing their nutrition or start to journal, start to see some progress, now all of a sudden they're in a better state that you can talk more about like specific goals because now you've changed their state of mind. So it's been this back and forth in my head of like where these certain things fit at the right time. It's been an interesting journey.
That is interesting. I think about SMART goals as you're describing that, and they're specific and measurable.
Yeah.
And they're while how many people have made SMART goals and not reached them?
100. Yeah.
Right. And then why is that? They're
Because
not
yeah,
they're not thinking about the process.
yeah, like where I mean, if you get somebody in, right, and they do Fran or they do like some like tough workout that they've never done before in their life, and then afterwards like, holy shit, I just finished something like that. What else am I possibly capable of? All of a sudden, you broke the
Mm-hmm.
seal of working this. That's why I do like the way Mark has broke down his method, because it's not just a one-time thing that you do. This is a process that you're working with over and over again.
Oh yeah.
In the work that you do, how much do you go into mindset with your clients and your members when they're coming in and speaking to you? Is there a specific way that you approach that with people? Are they coming in already knowing like they're going to talk about this from, kind of like the work that you do? How does that process work for you?
Yeah, that's a fun conversation because we are working on it right now where how do we take this and integrate it into our gym to where we have consistent mindset workouts? Enlifted is doing that right now where they're building out a Enlifted mindset gym.
Oh, cool.
And with that idea in mind, how do I now bring this to my clients here at the gym, and we do it as a community working on these things. Currently, the way that I would work with someone in mindset coaching would be listening for them to bringing up something about them being stuck in life. And if I hear I'm stuck or I'm just really drained at work or whatever it might be, then jumping on and saying, I can help you with that. And taking them through the 4-step process on whatever that might be and see where that leads for them. Ultimately, with the goal of just giving them some space and clarity so that they can breathe. A lot of times, the reason why people feel stuck or that they have failed is because everything's real tight up in here, right? Mark talks about that. The breathing's up here, everything's stuck up there. If we give them an opportunity to just take some deep breaths, read it a little bit slower, right? Or write it down for the first time in general, and then read it slower, and then add some breath in there. All of a sudden, that the problem that's going over and over in their mind becomes much smaller. It's not their problem anymore. It's they're observing this, and then they can make decisions based off of where they want to go, not decisions based off of the fear of what could
Mm.
happen, right? Or them failing. Um, that's how I implement it right now. We definitely talk a lot in classes about soft talk and
Yeah.
affirmations and negations and projections and those types of things. Not in the sense so much of trying to coach or teach them as much as just bringing awareness to it. And
Mhm.
that's a big piece of have people having awareness of how they speak or even how the self-talk that they have. If you can slowly start to shift those things, you can see big changes in
Mhm.
everything else that happens in life. So,
Yeah, just I was talking to Kim Kesting the other day about this, about the journaling process of like read it through and then read it again slower, then read it, then take a breath in between.
and 4-step it.
It's a powerful process to
Powerful.
work with. Yeah, it's amazing how your whole physiology really changes when you do that. And I think the topic of breath work, I think, is interesting because people think it's this either holotropic or this Wim Hof type work that you need to do of going deep into this, like almost like the high intensity version of breath work
Hmm.
versus just a slow, deep breath through the gut instead of high and tight in the chest. It's amazing how different you start thinking about the words that you're using and take it from the emotional side into the objective side. And I like how you said you approach it there because I think some people we want to jump so quickly into the mindset piece because we know it's that important with people. But more often than not, I found like people are going to tell you when it's the right time to start implementing it. The first thing
Oh yeah.
they want to get in good shape, they want to change their body, they want to get in. They're going to tell you the right moment when this is going to come in.
Yeah, and that's, building, we talk as coaches, our primary goal in every class is to build trust. And we're not looking to build all the trust in one session. It's over time, I'm slowly building trust with my athletes. They can trust me that I am doing what's best for them. They can trust me to give them honest feedback. They can trust me to start telling me more things about what's happening in their lives. And that's when that starts to come in.
Mhm.
And being a coach in our dynamic, it's easy to see when someone's off after you've been working with them for a little while. And then you can go up and say, hey, how are we feeling today?
Right.
Well, I'm kind of dragging. Okay, that's fine. We can take it a little bit easy. Is there anything in particular that's dragging you down? Well, this thing at work, and then that's your opening,
There it
right? They
is. Yeah.
feel because a lot of times, and they'll use the words, I kind of feel stuck.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, sweet.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, I can help you with that. And
You
then
know,
and then just get them, hey, why don't we set up a call and
mhm.
get on and I can help you get unstuck. Does that sound like something you want to do? And then we just set up a call and get on there. And honestly, with most of my athletes here, like I'll do a session pro bono to get them started,
Mhm.
um, because I love it so much.
Yeah.
Just to see what happens, the shift that happens. And then it's not even in the session, it's like a week later
Yeah.
and then seeing them and just
Mhm.
how they're like operating. It's amazing to see. Yeah.
It's funny. I think as coaches, we talk a lot about people, the clients, they want, oh, this instant gratification. They want to get this as fast as possible. But at the same time, we often do the same thing. We want the immediate results from the people we're working with. So we dump everything that we know on them right at the beginning of, oh, we're going to change your nutrition and your training, then we're going to get this, and then we're going to crush your mindset. And we want to get them going, not realizing we're doing the same shit that we are telling them not to do in
Hmm.
their process of it. It's really interesting.
And why do we want to do that?
Mhm. It's well, probably because you're excited to help somebody. Like you want to get them there as fast as possible.
Could be.
Mhm.
I see. So that was me.
Yeah.
I would, people would come in, hey, look, I'm going to help you with your nutrition. We're going to do this and we're going to do this. And you're going to be in the best shape of your life in 6 months. And you're just going to love me.
Yeah.
Right. And what was
Ah,
I,
yeah.
yeah, what was I really looking for? Right. And that's, coaches, it's interesting because you look at coaches and we do want to help other people. And a lot of times what I have found with coaches is there's an underlying need to help people.
Mm.
And the need stems from something that's within us. We need it. And so, you take the word, I need to help people, and you, again, projection, and you take the I and turn it into, uh, they need to help me, right? Or I need help, and you start
That's
switching that up and
yeah.
exploring those things. And that's what four stepping does. And you start realizing, well, hold on, am I doing this for them then? Or am I doing this for
I
me?
just got a little ego boost and
Mm.
because somebody needs me and somebody wants me.
And
Yeah.
that's the confident coach compared to the comfortable coach.
That's awesome. Wow, that's a beautiful insight. I really like that. It is. It's funny that yeah, you get like a new client and somebody's like coming in and you're like, yes. But in the subconsciously, it's you're saying, oh, somebody needs me. I'm just filling my own, ego, and I'm gonna do everything right off the bat to make sure that they love me and they never leave
Mm.
me, and we're gonna have
They
this
never
beautiful,
leave me.
yeah,
Oh
they have
man.
this beautiful, simpatico relationship forever. And that's the difference between confident. Wow, I really like that.
As an
Um,
affiliate owner, I had that at the beginning where when I first took over and I was the owner of Ralston Creek CrossFit, there were multiple times where I would lose a member and it would devastate me. And I couldn't quite understand why. And I would make decisions based off of that. It wasn't decisions based off of what was best for the business, best for my coaches, best for my members. It was what is the decision that will ensure that no one will leave me.
mhm.
And not until working with Mark and diving into that and understanding that as a child, I had a instance where that was a big piece of what formed my development of this need not to be left,
Yep.
right? And it was this imposter syndrome feeling of if they leave me, I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
And what you realize is there it rarely has anything to do with you, right? They have so much else going on. And you know what? If I would have just been listening to
Mhm.
what they were really trying to tell me, then they may have not even left.
Yeah.
But because I was so wound up in trying to ensure that they didn't leave and trying to give them all this stuff, I didn't hear what they were trying to actually say.
Yeah.
And so what they were trying to get across to me as their coach. And so the listening piece has changed a lot, as well as that confident to comfortable coach
Mhm.
has shifted to where now I can hear more of what they truly need. And the truth is some of them don't need what I have to offer them.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean I can't support them still. So
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, there's a great quote by, I think it's David Foster Wallace, who said, you'll stop worrying so much about what people think of you when you realize how seldom they do.
yes.
It's
Isn't
because
that something?
we've all got our own stuff, and it is like as coach. It's funny you said that, Jeremy. I went through this a lot last year with that same thing. Like anybody like left or had to stop, and it felt like a breakup, and
Yeah.
I would go nuts. And my buddy who's a great coach, a great mindset, and we were just having a conversation. I was telling him about this, and he's like, "Oh yeah," he's like, "You feel abandoned." And I
Mhm.
was like, "Oh shit." And I went through all the abandonment stuff before. I was like, "Oh, this is an interesting pattern that's going through." And then you realize, yeah, it is very much just about your own thought process behind it. So as coaches, we need the work that we're spilling out to people as much as anybody to work on yourself. So
Yeah, coaches need coaches.
100%, yeah. So I know you have, I mean, you have a family, you've been in business now for
Mhm.
over a decade with this.
Mhm.
How do you focus on balancing the things that are priority and value to you of giving your best in the work that you do, but also with your own self-care and training as well as your family? What's your process like as it's evolved, as you've built your family up and as the business has, continuously grown? How do you manage that for yourself?
That's a ever evolving process for me. There was when my daughter was first born, I started doing the 75 hard challenge. Have you heard of
Mhm.
75 hard and that process? Started doing that, and that really helped make shift some things in my life and to become a better father, better business owner. Um, Again, still believe that a little bit of that was fear-based, why I was making certain decisions based off of that and needing to have such a restrictive protocol on my life. Um, as that has evolved, I still do have a protocol. So there are certain things I do every day, such as journaling and a cold shower and um, work out some type of movement, get outdoors, read 10 pages. So things that I had taken from the different things I have done, with ultimately the idea that if I do not complete all those in that day, that's okay. As long as the thing that is a higher priority is the reason why. So, for example, my daughter, my wife, my family is number one, as it should be. And then below that, it is my community, which also incorporates my business because my business is part of the community. And then from there, it is the community at large. The protocol kind of fits in there, where the protocol is so that I have the energy to give back to all of those things. And I want to make sure that I'm optimizing that protocol simply because I want to optimize my energy so then I can fulfill my purpose in life. And then I can also give out the love to my different sections of love, family, community, larger community. Um, and so I just kind of work towards, take out kind of, I work within that realm, but it changes week to week, month to month. Recently realized that during the winter is not the time for me to really, really push, even though that's the time that society tells us that we need to crack down and it's
Yeah.
New Year's resolutions. I'm more understanding that like the springtime is my New Year's. And so I'm going back to the old calendar back before, the new calendar was taken over
Yeah.
by I think the Catholic Church or something but way back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um
1300s
yeah,
Gregorian, I
yeah.
think is, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like I'm going back to spring was always the new year.
Mhm.
I'm operating more from that sense. So now it's more family time, take it a little bit easier and understanding those. And that changes with age as well.
Mhm.
Notice that. And so finding, I don't necessarily like the word balance, um, but finding a good rhythm,
Harmony.
harmony is a great, yeah, that's a great word, Mike, for finding that. And I see that more at the older I get, that the harmony is so much more important.
Yeah.
The way that I present myself in my family as a father and a husband and bringing harmony to the house is so much more important than all the other stuff of me needing to accomplish. Again, needing
Yeah.
to accomplish so that I can feel like I am worthy, right?
100. Yeah. No, I like that. I like that you said that too about like the winter time is everybody's in this like thought that this is the time you need to push. The analogy I use with my community is the highway. We call it the highway of strength, where there's three different lanes on the highway, right? You got the left lane, which is going really fast, all right? That's when you're pushing things. That's when you're really trying to
Hmm.
put some, focus and some leverage. The right lane is your carpool lane, all right? It's a little bit slower. That's kind of when you're getting on the highway. Maybe it's time just to aggressively maintain some things, just kind of slowly build some momentum. And then the middle lane is somewhere else, right?
Hmm.
All three lanes, they're going at different speeds, but what are they all doing? They're all moving forward. So no matter
Yeah.
what, there's progress to be made regardless of speed. And I thought that like when I got into this year, I'm like, this is a veer into the highway on the right lane time. I don't need to go crazy fast. This is a time just to gain some momentum on things that I'm working with. So it's kind of similar, like that harmony of don't need to push it on all things, just start gaining some momentum.
I love that. And I think that if you get momentum and it feels good, then ride it,
Yeah.
right? Like ride those waves, understanding that it's not going to be like that all the time.
Mhm.
That you can gain that momentum and ride that wave in one area of your life, knowing that it's going to slow down and you're going to pull into a different exit or onto a different highway. I think
Yeah.
that changes. I love the analogy. It's good.
Beautiful. Awesome.
Yeah.
Jeremy Strawn, Jeremy, I really appreciate you coming on. I really admire the way that your mind works and how you approach the work that you're doing with coaching. I really got a
Thanks,
lot
Mike.
out of this conversation, and really grateful you come on today.
I appreciate you bringing me on.
Absolutely. Yeah. If people want to check out more about what you're doing, follow you,
Yep.
what's the best place that they can go and check you out?
Yeah, Instagram is coach.jeremy.strawn and ralstoncreekcf.com for our website. And you'll find all of our social media links on the website as well.
I appreciate it, man. Until next time, I'd love to have you back and
Thanks, buddy.
do
Appreciate
this
it.
again, man. So
Yeah.
awesome. Listeners, thank you so much. Catch you guys in the next one. All right, peace.